Hi, I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome to A Closer Look. The Prime Minister has made modernizing government one of the key initiatives of his government. We're going to talk about that today with the Minister of State for Grand Bahama, Senator the Honorable Kwasi Thompson. Senator, Minister, welcome to the show again.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Prime Minister talks about bringing government to the people, making it more friendly. How does this e-government and modernization effort speak to that philosophy?
Well, as you know, e-government is really one of the most exciting parts of our job here at the government, in the government, because it's really an opportunity to directly touch and change and improve the lives of Bahamians. You know, the government really is about providing services for its citizens. And so the e-government initiative is really about streamlining those services, removing the bureaucracy, and making those services easier to be accessible to the people.
You're really talking about reform of the public service.
Absolutely. It's also about the ease of doing business. Ease of doing business with respect to the citizen, but also ease of doing business with respect to our businesses and our commercial sector. Because our citizens have to do business with the government every day. And what we want to do is to cut down the amount of time that they actually are doing business with the government so that they could be more effective in doing other things. The same with respect to businesses. We want to be able to cut down the amount of time that they have to access these government services. So it's really about the customer. And sometimes we forget that the public service is about providing a public service. It is about the people and transforming their lives and making their lives better.
You recently went to Estonia in Northern Europe too. How does that help you with what you're trying to do here?
Well, I'll tell you, going to Estonia really was one of those come to Jesus moments for me. You know, Estonia really is a small country. They have a little over 1 million people, but they have one of the most sophisticated e-government programs in the world. And one of the things that was educational for us was to see how a small country was able to use e-government and digital services to catapult themselves way ahead of larger countries when it came to the ease of doing business and when it came to really commercial transactions, when it came to providing services for their countrymen. So it was eye-opening for us to see how these services connect to one another, to see how they use these services to better the lives of their citizens. So it was a real learning experience for us.
Is there a plan to bring some of those Estonians here to demonstrate what it is you're talking about?
Well, actually, they've already been here.
They've been here.
We've been able to invite them. They've come. They've actually had a number of conversations with different agencies, again, to expose the agencies to what options there is out there. We are excited because we are embarking upon not an Estonian model, but we are embarking upon a Bahamian model which is shaped by using the best practices of countries like Estonia, but other countries as well who have done an awesome job with respect to e-government.
Generally, any demonstrations about what's going to happen or what the government wants to happen happens in New Providence. The capital is here after all. But I would imagine you're talking about e-government with the transfer technology in Grand Bahama. Some of this should be held in Grand Bahama?
Ace, you know, it goes even beyond Grand Bahama. One of the things the Prime Minister and the government has been focused on is really the Family Islands. And one of the things that we want to stay away from is just being Nassau-centric. But this e-government process is really also about providing the same kind of service to all of our islands, including Grand Bahama, because everyone will be able to access the same service, access it at the same period of time, and get the same results, whether you are in Nassau, whether you're in Abaco, whether you are in Eleuthera, in Nagua, it shouldn't matter. And that's one of the reasons why we are actually focused on e-government, because it gives us the opportunity to touch the lives of not just those who are on our major islands, but touch the lives of those in our family islands as well.
This sounds like mass training to get everybody up to speed, identifying weaknesses in certain areas. I imagine whole departments being identified for training. Is that the kind
training,
of thing?
Yes, absolutely. Training is extremely important. Retraining is also extremely important. But one of the basis really for this program is a program they call the X-Road program. It's one of the things that we learned from Estonia. And what it really does is it changes a concept that we have. And that concept is that each agency right now has and focuses on their own technology. They have been providing their own digital service through their own agency. But the problem is, those agencies do not talk to each other. They do not digitally talk to each other. So what that means is, because a number of the services we need to have is cross agencies, it causes the citizen to have to go to each one of the agencies to be able to get some information and provide it to the other agency.
Passport Office, great example.
Passport Office is a great example. Right now, if you want to go ahead and renew your passport, you have to go to the Registrar General's office. And think of this concept. We are one government. The Passport Office is a part of the government. The Registrar General's office is a part of the government. But what does the citizen have to do? He has to go to one government office, which is a part of the government, get a government document, and take that same government document, physically take that same government document to another government office and provide that government document to the other government office. It is the citizen having to work for the government. We want to flip it. We want it to say that it's the government working for the citizen. So instead of you having to be the middleman to provide these government documents, we want each agency to digitally talk to each other. So that same information should pass from the Passport Office or pass from the Registrar General's office directly to the Passport Office, so that we are not the ones who are carrying the physical paper, but the agencies are digitally talking to each other.
Sounds like, I heard somebody call it the once-only policy.
Absolutely, that is exactly correct. And it is a foundation to the system that we are trying to put forward, which is that if a government office or agency has a piece of data or information about you, no other government agency is allowed to ask you for that piece of information. So if the Registrar General's office has information and certification about your birth, then no other government agency is allowed to ask you to provide that information. The government agency must go to the other government agency and get the information from them. Imagine the time that you as a citizen would save from having to go to the Registrar General's office and collect this information to go to the Passport Office, or to go to road traffic, or to go to the Parliamentary Registration Office. It is really about making the citizens' life better by saving the amount of time that they have to go and do business with the government.
And less frustrating.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Government already has some services online. I want you to talk about, if you could identify the ones that are most pivotal and the ones that you were targeting to get online, but we got to take a break, and we'll be back with more of a closer look at Minister Kwasi Thompson after this. Welcome back to A Closer Look. Anthony Newbold speaking with the Minister of State for Grand Bahama, Senator the Honorable Kwasi Thompson. We're talking about modernization and e-government. Once-only policy, just one of the planks of the entire platform. What other policy planks do we have in that you can tell me about today?
So there's really some foundational principles that the whole e-government platform is going to be built on. And these are really best practices of other governments and other e-government processes. So once only, as I said, is one. But another one really is about an electronic identification. because one of the things that we in the Bahamas have, we have about 3 or 4 different identifications. You have a passport, you have a national insurance card, you have a voter's card, you have all these different a driver's license, all these different forms of identification.
And depending on who you're talking to, they may not accept one of them.
Absolutely. So what you want to do is to be able to provide one single identification for you, but that through that single identification, you can access the government services. And right now, everybody is familiar with the national insurance card. Everybody is familiar with the national insurance number. So we believe that that's going to be the foundation. There may be some adjustments to it, but we believe that's going to be the foundation to your electronic identification. Another thing is about the interoperability. What do I mean by that? It means that each of the agencies are going to be digitally connected, but digitally talk to each other. They're going to have their own data and control of their own information. But when one agency needs to access information from another agency, they're going to be able to digitally speak to that agency, and that agency then provides that information back to you, back to that other agency. Another aspect of this is cybersecurity. Very, very important for this kind of project, because we know the threats that are out there.
Yes.
But one of the things that we have to do is when you are sharing this information is to ensure that this information is protected. So cybersecurity is one of the foundational principles that has to be there as well. And then it's also about data ownership, because
Yes.
that is very, very important. You know, and it's a shift in thinking, because right now we believe that the government owns the information in the government agencies. It's going to be a shift, because the information that the government has about you really is going to be owned by you. And what does that mean? That means that if anybody is going to be looking at your data or sharing your data, you have a right to know and question why this person is looking, why my data is being transferred from one place to the other. It is about transparency, because if we're doing it, we have to be transparent to the public.
Is that something where you want to share information about me, you need my permission?
It is going to get to that point as well, because again, when you look at these models that we're going to be looking at, for example, in Estonia, if one agency wants to ask another agency about you and information that that other agency has about you, they, in some circumstances, have to first notify you and get your permission first before that information can be transferred. There's some information that really is just public information.
Yeah.
And so that kind of information is going to be passed, your name, your address, these are things
basic.
that really are basic information, and public record.
Yeah.
So those aren't a difficulty. But say, for example, your hospital records.
Yes.
Say, for example, your criminal record. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of information that before it's transferred, you ought to know, and you ought to be able to give persons permission. And they ask about cybersecurity. But right now, how secure is your paper information in some of these agencies? You don't know when information is being shared. But if it's shared digitally, and you have a right to be notified when it's being shared, then it's even more transparent.
Yeah. For whatever you plan to do, you meaning the government, I presume there's some pilot project that must be to provide some template for.
As you can imagine, this really is a brand new concept. This interoperability, all these things being connected, it's a brand new concept for us here in the Bahamas. So it's really something that has to be built. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we are doing is we're building a pilot to see how this model is actually going to work in practice. It's going to be done through the IDB loan that the Prime Minister just signed, and moving towards the entire digital transformation. But here's what the pilot is going to be about. We have certain agencies who have already agreed. So we have the Passport Office, we have the road traffic for the driver's license, we have NIB, and we have the Registrar General's Office, who are going to be tied in to the X-Road or software.
Some pivotal agencies.
Absolutely. And what that's going to mean is that you should be able to, after the pilot is completed and we've gone through all of the testing, that you should be able to apply online 24 hours a day for your passport or for renewal of your passport, and you should not be asked to provide a Registrar General's Office certificate or birth certificate. Why? Because they're going to be digitally talking to each other. The same thing with respect to your driver's license. You should be able to apply online and not have to provide some other information that comes from another government agency, but they're going to digitally talk to each other. This pilot also eventually can get to the point where a bank can be connected to it. It can get to a point where a utility can be connected to it. And again, imagine what that means. That means that if you are able to connect into the system, that the bank can be able to ask the Registrar General's Office. So instead of you being able to provide your passport and provide all of this information to the bank can digitally ask the Registrar General's Office for the information, digitally ask the Passport Office for the information, and then that makes the customer, makes his job a whole lot easier. He doesn't have to traipse around and find all of this information and do all of these different things for these different agencies. So it's really about making life better and making services better for the customer, for the individual.
Very competent, very smart people pulling this all together. Who's going to do that?
So we have in the Office of the Prime Minister a modernization and digitization unit. It's being headed now by a senior, one of the very senior permanent secretaries. It's also encompassing those persons from DIT. And again, we also have the IDB loan that's also going to be attached to it. So there's going to be a unit that's set up to go ahead and structure this. But we also have something called the Prime Minister's Round Table, which really is about providing insight from the private sector. Okay. One of the things that we really can't do is go ahead and go full force into this without having the input from the private sector. So we have persons from the unions, we have persons from banks, we have the Chamber of Commerce, we have Central Bank, we have the Office of the Prime Minister. There are a number of other private sector persons who are on board helping us to put this whole thing together. It's not just about the government, but it's really about how the government can work along with the private sector to ease of doing business for the citizen.
When do we see a rollout of this pilot?
So we're thinking that within the next 6 months, that the pilot should be completed. We are working on it now. We have been meeting with the different agencies. There obviously is a lot of work that needs to be done. The agencies have to agree, but not just agree. We have to actually make the software to be able to connect those agencies. It's really a detailed process because you actually have to have an agreement between each of the agencies as to what data can go, what data can't go. It's also about looking at the legislation. Yes. We have to tweak the laws as well because our laws must be updated in order to facilitate something like this.
Yeah, we can talk some more about that, but we got to take this final break and we'll be back with more, a closer look with the Minister of State for Grand Bahama, Senator the Honorable Kwasi Thompson. Welcome back to A Closer Look. Anthony Newbold speaking with Minister Kwasi Thompson about e-government and modernization of government. We're talking about all these services that are going to be available once only. How are you going to access this information? Because you don't need to be, even because you don't physically have to go to Registrar Generals and the Passport Office and all over. You'd have to do the same thing by accessing different portals.
I mean, you make an excellent point because, you know, right now, each of these agencies may have their own different website. They may have their provide services through their own different website. We actually have almost 200 government services that you really need to attempt to get online. But here's the thing, you can't have 50 different websites to be able to access each of these services. So there has to be a single portal, a single window, single website that the citizen is able to access these services. Again, what you're trying to do is make it simple, and you're trying to make it efficient. And so having all of these different websites to get different services is really not the idea. The idea is to have that single one portal that you're going to be able to access or be able to get those services through that one single portal. So that concept really is very, very important.
You talk about all this technology, and we know the Prime Minister is a geek in that way, loves technology. He wants to have an e-cabinet as well.
Yep. For more than one reason. One thing we have to do is, if we are going to be enforcing this digital transformation, it has to start from the top. So we as cabinet ministers can't say to the rest of the public service, go ahead and digitize your services, but we as cabinet ministers are toting around loads and loads of paper.
Yeah.
And right now, it's to the point where if the citizens knew, we carry around every week loads and loads of paper to each cabinet meeting, and we go through all of these loads and loads of paper to go through doing making our cabinet decisions. And remember, cabinet is the highest level decision-making body in the country. And what if we are able to institute e-cabinet? And what in essence that is instead of us it means us going paperless.
Yeah.
It means accessing your cabinet documents by way of digitally. It means being able to read them, comment on them. It means really voting on them digitally. And it means being more efficient when it comes to cabinet decisions. And here's why this is so critical for the country. If the cabinet can make their decisions more quickly and more efficiently, then that means that those decisions can filter into the public service and filter into the country more efficiently and quicker, which means it's governance being done quicker, governance being done more efficiently and better for the people.
So people don't have to wait 6 months for a decision that takes
that's
6 weeks.
Exactly right. You're going to be able to, as a cabinet minister, you'll be able to upload your documents. You're going to be able to share your documents with other ministers. In some cases, you'll be able to vote in advance on those things, so that when you get to a cabinet meeting, instead of the cabinet meeting being hours and hours and hours, you're really going to be able to cut that time period down, so ministers could be in their ministries doing what they need to do in their ministries
and running this country.
And running the country. So that's really where the Prime Minister wants us to go, and his mind is focused. He's not just sort of directing this, but he's really driving it.
Yeah.
And so this is something that's heavily on his agenda, and it's something that we're going to be able to deliver to the people.
We're talking about information. Actually, we're talking about massive amounts of information.
Yeah.
Is there going to be some central depository for all this information where it's properly managed and secured, as we're talking about cybersecurity?
Again, I want you to think about it this way. Each of the agencies right now have their own data. They have their own information that they've collected. Some of their information is already digital. So each of these agencies in different places have their own data. So we are not talking about depositing all of their data in one location. That would actually be kind of dangerous when it comes to cybersecurity. But what we are talking about is when one agency requires a piece of information from another agency, we are talking about that agency requesting the information digitally, and then the other agency sending it to them digitally. Now, what that requires is cybersecurity checks at each end. So cybersecurity checks at the doorway of the agency, and then cybersecurity checks at where it's being transferred, and then cybersecurity checks at the agency that's receiving it. So all throughout the system, there has to be a strong emphasis on cybersecurity, because one of the things that people ask this question all the time is, if all of this information is going out there and moving from one place to the other place, how are you going to secure it?
Yeah, is it safe?
Is it safe? But there is a way, once we are focused, and I think this government, and not think, but I know this government really is focused on doing that. And while it's at its foundational stage, we can build in those cybersecurity protections that it requires. So it really means a focus on it, and it really means bringing in and training the expertise to be able to ensure that it is safe.
And all of this you're talking about some standardized procedures about how you access this information, who gets to access it.
Yep. It is. I mean, it's a lot of work that is going to have to be put into it, a lot of structure that's going to have to be put into it, rules that's going to have to be built into it, agreements between the agencies as to what can be shared and what cannot be shared. As I said, legislative changes that's going to have to be done to it, because some information right now legally cannot be shared.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to also adjust your laws to be able to do it. You're going to have to adjust your laws to talk about data ownership, to put those protections in there, and then address your cybersecurity laws right now, so that you need to strengthen those cybersecurity laws. Because right now there are some things that, with respect to cybersecurity, that might not be illegal, but we may need to make it illegal to ensure that we protect persons' data. So a lot of those things are happening. It's really, really exciting, because we think that once this thing happens, this is really something that can change the way government works. And not just change the way government works, but change the way that it works for the people, and change the way that services are delivered for people, really making their lives different, making their lives better.
Thank you again, Minister Thompson. And thank you for watching A Closer Look. Again, you can access A Closer Look Facebook at A Closer Look. See you again next week.